Welcome!
Welcome to the omniverse of Nick, and the finale to What If Breakdown joined the Autobots. We open up where we ended off last time, with Ratchet, Starscream, and Starscream clones surrounding Megatron after Orion Pax is restored to Optimus Prime, and the Autobots retreat. And Megatron's left at the Space Bridge location all alone, surrounded by the synthetic traitor faction, but no Arachnid. So, with this finale comes the backstory of what happened and Ratchet's plan and how it ended in this moment, which, as any villain group explains, they explain it literally right to Megatron's face. So, while the whole Unicron thing was going on, Ratchet, Starscream, they took Arachnid, who was still unconscious, back to the Harbinger. And there, Starscream analyzed and found a bunch of things that will not only help their plan, but exceed its original expectations. They find the room with the clones, and, as such, Starscream uses it and creates his clones, but also added with synthetic energon, and kills one because of the synthetic energon's effects, and you know how it went in the Cliff story, how Starscream mastered the art of synthetic energon. Yeah, that happens just the same, except it's even easier because Ratchet's there and he used the synthetic energon first, so it's different. Well, I mean, not too different because it would happen that way in the Cliff story, but you guys get the point. Anyway, Arachnid wakes up. And right away, not only has her amnesia set in as to the fact that she doesn't know these people, she knows that person right there, Ratchet. He's the one who took on that synthetic energon. And she's trying to remember all of what happened. But for now, she's just there. She doesn't know what's going on. And she's kept prisoner for now. They're watching her. The clones are watching her with every move. And Starscream says, "Now what, Doctor? What is this great plan of yours to terminate Megatron?" Ratchet says, "It's very simple. The synthetic energon, Starscream's little clones, kidnapping Arachnid, and getting Starscream on his side is all for one single solitary reason. To bring down Megatron and stop the Decepticons once and for all, and put them where they should have been since Cybertron fell. And there's only one way that can get done. Optimus, he never had the way. And he knew that from the second that he went against him when he was trying to go after Megatron himself, which Starscream scoffs at, thinking there's no way Ratchet would have been able to take on Megatron alone. And Ratchet says maybe that's true. But now, he actually thanks his old friend, Optimus Prime, because without him stopping him and Breakdown betraying his plan, which he thought Breakdown was on his side, Ratchet now has the full-fledged motive and true plan of what they're going to do to destroy Megatron and stop the Decepticons once and for all. All they have is Soundwave and the cons. Megatron has nothing left. And Arachnid here, she was believed to be dead, but she got out of there with one arm and amnesia. Ratchet repaired her, but she has no memory of her being a rogue con, a Decepticon, an Autobot, none of it. Optimus forged her into an Autobot, but Ratchet had begun growing more and more suspicious and wary of the fact more and more cons were joining the ranks. It just disillusioned what they were fighting for, what they were trying to end. And now, with all that said, Ratchet has the perfect plan. He says that with Arachnid down and her memory still gone, the synthetic energon and the clones, and the two of them working together, they can manipulate arachnids. And they can manipulate Arachnid, take advantage of her amnesia, and use her, along with the synthetic energon, as the fuel, the shield, and the sword that will take down Megatron. He'll be so interested in the dark energon and the surges around this planet from this rising darkness, which he says is Unicron. He'll be so occupied as to what happens during and after that it will be their perfect time to strike when he's all by himself. He just knows that at some point Megatron's going to be on his own. They have to wait for the perfect advantage for him to be on his own and no catches. Like, they know that he is going to be on his own and nothing's going to get in the way of it. So, he says if they can do that, weaponize the synthetic energon into themselves, the clones, and use Arachnid as a true weapon of fury and what Arachnid's known for, and take advantage of her amnesia, then they can finally defeat Megatron. But they must make sure they get Arachnid under their control, and that they are able to use the synthetic energon to make themselves the strongest, fastest, and most angry without losing control, so that they take down Megatron once and for all. So he says, get every ounce of synthetic energon that you can handle. And Starscream does. And now Ratchet smiles. Phase 1 of their plan is already complete. Going into phase 2, they have themselves integrated with synthetic energon, and Starscream has created the clones, took one out, and mastered the others with synthetic energon. Phase 2 of the plan, the clones have become the weaponized synthetic energon partners that they need. Now, phase 3. He walks over with the synthetic energon, as does Starscream and the clones surrounding her, and says, phase 3, take Arachnid and put her under our complete control with this. But Arachnid has fully become aware of her surroundings, and even with one bad arm, she knows she's got to get out of here now. And she, just in a fit of panic and just fight or flight, she webs up the entire freaking area in which they're all in the Harbinger, in the clone room. She webs the clones, she webs Ratchet, she webs Starscream, she webs everything and everyone just in the span of 10 seconds. And then she books it out of there with her arms. She can't transform in a helicopter mode because she doesn't remember how to do that. So she's in a run for her life, just looking for somewhere to hide, maybe get back and warn Optimus and everything. Just try to get back and hide from them. Starscream says, I will send out the clones immediately. With one arm, no trace of memory where to go or where to hide. And the fact that she was already taken out when you and myself brought her here, she can't have gotten far in any way. Ratchet says, while that might be true, Arachnid is probably way too far gone, and the threat of this looming darkness might kill her anyway. They must stay here. Besides, he says, they can still complete the plan. They just have to make the clones stronger. They've made themselves the strongest that they're going to get. And he's noticed another side effect besides anger. It seems as though it burns through natural energon reserves. So, this means that they are at the limits of what can take them through their own energon reserves without killing them. So, they need to learn to master and manipulate this weakness and side effect so that they can make themselves much more balanced and even stronger. and that starts with themselves into the clones. Getting Arachnid would just take longer anyway. She was a nuisance, which he thought he could control. Clearly, even with amnesia, it's not even worth the bother. Meanwhile, Arachnid is still on the run, but she realizes she's far from where their base was, Optimus and everybody else, and who she helped out, RC and everything. So she finds a cave, but she goes a little deeper. Right now, she's not worried about, like, where this is or what she's doing. She's just trying to hide because she doesn't know if she's being followed. So she delves deep into the cave, and she finds the Insecticon hive. And whenever a few of the stasis Insecticons begin to arise, even the scouts and Hardshell, it flashes Arachnid's mind. And suddenly, her memory comes back. Because remember, the Insecticons and her were of one mind. This, combined with bunches and bunches and bunches and bunches of Insecticons, the scouts and Hardshell, that would be completely enough to resurrect Arachnid's mind. Now she remembers everything. She was almost killed. Then she sees the symbol on her stomach and her arm. She must have been taken in by the Autobots. Well, she hasn't got to worry about that now. She will find Ratchet and Starscream. She will find Megatron and the Autobots. She will terminate them all, and she will be the lone ruler of every human and Cybertronian ever. And with her one good arm, and her Decepticon and animalistic urges back, she tells her army, "Rise, my armada, and attack." And so, without the Arachnid part really being filled in, and saying that Arachnid had just escaped, Starscream finishes the story of telling Megatron everything that happened, and said, "It's a shame that you weren't able to take out Optimus Prime and the Autobots before they were able to escape. You could have very well stopped the lineage of the Primes from happening, my dearest Megatron. It's sad. All your leadership and all your years in Kaon have just blown up in smoke because of one con you forgot to look into, and a medic you really should have looked at more." Megatron just smiles and says, "Well, well, this is an awfully smart strategy coming from you, Starscream, and I would have expected more from a medic Autobot than teaming with a snake like yourself. But if you think that this pathetic little plan of yours, especially without your little rogue hunter, is enough to stop me, you would do well to remember I was a champion of the pits of Kaon not only due to my savage might, but also my cunning." And as a clone attempts to escape, Megatron manhandle throws him across the space bridge area. And he then plummets his way over and slams his foot down on top of him. And prepares when another attacks him to shoot him, and he does. But then Ratchet prepares to punch, then gets his arm twisted around, and Megatron looks at him with utter shame and surprise, saying he expected better, and wiser, and punches Ratchet straight like he did in canon, throwing him to the ground, and Ratchet realizing and coming back to his senses that he's been a fool. He teamed with Starscream, took Arachnid. He can't believe what he's done. Starscream's not giving up, though, and unleashes a rocket. But Megatron slices it, and he gets right up in the clone's face, and slices it into pieces, and is about to attempt to take out Ratchet, because all that's left is a clone and Starscream. He's about to take out Ratchet and then go to whatever Starscream and clone is left when an Insecticon slams him against a part of the space bridge area. As the Insecticon hive, Hardshell, and Arachnid have arrived, and she tells her armada, engage Megatron. Keep him out of the way. Destroy Ratchet and Starscream's little faction. Hardshell goes in to kill Megatron, but Megatron just tosses him out of the way and unsheaths his blade and goes in for blasting. But Arachnid just webs and webs and webs with her one good arm. But with one good arm, Megatron is able to see this and knows what's going on much more clearly now that he's not distracted. And prepares to fire at Arachnid, but right when he does, he only gets one shot off at the webs thrown when he suddenly feels something pierce through his chest. And then an even more burning pain sensation from the back of him, an even more piercing attack. It's like the two pierced through the same area and out the other way. What was this? Starscream and his last clone basically cliff jumpered Megatron through both sides of his body, double impaling him. And with this, Megatron dies. And now, the two clones, well, the clone and Starscream, face Arachnid and the Insecticon hive. But Starscream says, while they should be able to finish their unfinished business, and while there's nothing more to worry about now that Megatron's dead, Soundwave and the Decepticons are leaderless now. Shouldn't we finish off the one loose end before tearing each other apart over the Decepticons' rule? And Ratchet just stares with the synthetic energon leaking and says, just get it over with. It's not like I could live with myself knowing the role I played in the Autobots' failure. And he says, if you're going to try to avenge and destroy what's left of your pride, the Autobots and the Decepticons, don't stop with me. Keep avenging until your sparks are satisfied. But you will find no satisfaction in a lone goal. And the second after he says that, it's like fate materialized itself in the form of saving Ratchet. Team Prime has sensed Ratchet's key signature come back online because of the synthetic energon. They knew something was off whenever Starscream's and signature and Ratchet's were corrupting around Megatrons at the space bridge. But they were too worried about Orion and Optimus and, that whole thing and, the end of season 1 into 2 and that whole thing. But once the signatures were no longer corrupted by synthetic energon and Ratchet's came back online, they knew something was up. And Arachnid showing up with the Insecticons, they knew they had to do something. So Team Prime has come in for the save. And Optimus cannot believe what he is staring at. Megatron is dead on the ground. There's multiple Starscreams dead. Ratchet's on the ground with synthetic energon leaking out of him, seemingly on death's door. And there's two Starscreams about to face Arachnid and a bunch of Insecticons. And she's evil again. Team Prime, including Optimus, they don't know what to think. Starscream says, well, Arachnid. Still feel up for that truce? Arachnid says, only because Team Prime deserves to die before I destroy you and the remaining Decepticons. Starscream tells his clone and the Insecticons, attack Optimus Prime and destroy the Autobots. Optimus says, Autobots, roll out and attack. and they all go in to fight, along with Knockout and Breakdown. But Ratchet knows, with Starscream, his clone, Arachnid, and the Insecticons, Optimus, even with Knockout and Breakdown, they stand no chance. And he knows something has to be done. And he grabs the containers of synthetic energon and forms it into one big, huge container and gets it all collected into one. Optimus says, "No, Ratchet! You have already been corrupted and drained and destroyed with that substance. I warned you, old friend, that this would come back to bite you. You might have chosen the wrong side, but you were great in trying to help us. We almost lost a great friend and a very important medic. What are you planning to do now?" Ratchet says, "I know what I have done. I know the side I chose. I know the wrongs that I have committed. But there's only one way that this can get done. There's only one way that you guys can win. And there's only one way that this war can end forever. Megatron might be dead, but unless Starscream's clones, Arachnid and the Insecticons are dealt with, Soundwave and the Decepticons will come in and finish what these ruffians and snakes won't. I have to do this, Optimus. Goodbye, old friend." And he gets out a blaster for the first time besides the video games. And he throws the big, huge chunks and bottles and containers of synthetic energon all in the area of Starscream and the clones and Arachnid and the Insecticons. He throws it all into one huge, gigantic burst of energy and effort. And he grabs and holds out a blaster for the first time in Transformers Prime history with Ratchet. And he fires. And a huge, humongous, and the biggest Transformers Prime explosion and the first synthetic energon explosion erupts the space bridge area, destroying all, and seemingly the Autobots escaping, with the wreckage revealing Ratchet's final move, sacrifice, and the end to this story. So, if the explosion itself, with it being synthetic energon and not a normal energon explosion, didn't literally kill all the Autobots in Ratchet's attempt to save all of them, then they would get away, and that ends the story. Now hold up. Before anybody in the comments starts getting on me about this being just like the Cliff story, just like the Dreadwing story, just like the Skyquake story, and just like the Sea Spray story, with it ending in a big twist and, big huge cliffhanger and all that, let me explain. Especially since it ended right at the beginning of Season 2 and not at the end like all the other ones. Before anybody gets on me for a somewhat repeating formula and never touching them on Season 3 yet in my what-ifs for Transformers Prime, let me explain. So, for the Cliff story, it was necessary, and there was big development through the story, and Starscream's big twist at the end being the main villain in the final battle, best way to end it. Skyquake's story, Arachnid was the only final boss left, and Skyquake being around, especially with the scraplets, meant that there was absolutely no choice. The Dreadwing one happened way later, so that actually went into Season 3. So that is the only one that's really delved into it, but it didn't even delve into it enough for it to matter, so that's why it was hardly even brought up or mentioned. For Sea Spray, he didn't have the biggest influence as a character, but his portrayal in the team and all of Team Prime meant that Season 3 was so close to happening, but not really worth explaining. And as for this one, well, since this is a very, not so much early story, because Cliff's the earliest that we can really go for besides Tailgate, which is an entirely different thing. Breakdown turning good meant that there was way more to go off with him and Knockout and Arachnid and Starscream. So many characters can connect to Breakdown more than all the other characters I've touched upon so far. Cliff being the closest one, and maybe one of the twins, Skyquake or Dreadwing. More or less Skyquake, really. Dreadwing got plenty to do, but hey, you guys get the gist of it. But anyway, this story ended like this, because with Breakdown and Knockout, basically both of them, and Breakdown being one of the heavy hitters of the Decepticons, it meant that with no Dreadwing around at the time, it meant that Megatron's forces were drastically low, and with Arachnid not joining the Decepticons, this means that the Decepticons would be even lower. So by the time Unicron's dealt with, which would be almost the exact same, Megatron would just be left all in. And I bet you guys are probably asking me, why did you make Ratchet team with Starscream of all people, have him turn on Megatron after he stayed with the cons, and then do all that? I mean, it was probably a great ending, and Ratchet got this huge sacrifice and redemption, but why? Well, it all comes down to the fact that there were so many things that put in place a bad Ratchet. Think about this for a second. Think about what I've done with Ratchet so far in the stories. In the Cliff story, Starscream killed him. In the Dreadwing story, he's the last one alive. I've realized more and more that Ratchet is so much more key a character than any of us probably realized. Without him, almost none of Prime happens the way that it should. He's not just a ground bridger guy. He's also the guy who basically kept almost the entire group alive. And even if he screwed up, once or twice, mainly once, he still proved his mettle in the terms of being the main one to make sure Team Prime operated. So, for this one, the Breakdown and Knockout situation, that wouldn't really set him into the whole thing yet. But Arachnid losing her memory and, her getting brought in, it would just make Ratchet feel so unsafe that the synthetic energon, okay, it's not really that big a deal, right? It's just gonna maybe just be an extra thing and, maybe that stuff. Or maybe something like that. But with Breakdown there, I could have made him have synthetic energon. And I did. But I wanted to take the route that Breakdown is so much smarter and so much more on the side of thinking straight than a lot of the cons. True, he did go in whenever Dreadwing tried to stop him, and true, he, didn't listen most of the times to Megatron or Bulkhead or Starscream, but he did think there was so much consideration about him joining the Autobots and so much consideration on a lot of things, and he played it smarter a lot more than he went in, guns blazing. And that actually makes him, that's actually why so many times he was better than Bulkhead until he, got freaking mechified, literally. And with all that said, it was just a matter of time before not only Ratchet was pushed past his patience with this whole situation, but the situation was put in place for him to do something. I could have made it so that he just goes off and faces Megatron alone, but then that would have turned the story into the direction where nothing would really get done. That's where I went with the Skyquake one, which is why I improvised. Here, I did way better. I pretty much combined the end of my Cliff story with Skyquake, but made it even more epic with a sacrifice for Ratchet. And, like I said, if the Autobots weren't incinerated by a much huger Energon explosion, they would get out of there. So what happens with the story here? We still got Soundwave, the Cons, Shockwave and Predaking, and Dreadwing. And also, Megatron can get resurrected. Well, none of that matters, as I've touched upon in a lot of stories. Sometimes, however many cons or however much left of a story you think there is, there's still over a season and a half and a movie left of the show in this story. Well, it doesn't matter, because like the Skyquake one, there's literally no point in, trying to drag a story where nothing's really going to happen. True, I could make Soundwave, the rest of the Cons, and Dreadwing all team up, maybe go find Shockwave, but that wouldn't really do anything. This was the perfect way to cap it off, to center the characters that mostly connected. True, Dreadwing was around, he connected with Breakdown for a little bit, but he's not a centerpiece focus in the terms of what made Breakdown a character. This was a story about tying in Breakdown and then what happens at the end. Because, yeah, I've centered the stories featuring Ratchet quite a lot, but sometimes even the main character can't be included and can't be the centerpiece of the story. But it was all about the implications about what happened after he survived, as per every character's survival. And the best way to go about this was to make it so that Starscream and Arachnid, the two main bads that were connected to Breakdown along with Knockout, were thrown in as the ultimate centerpiece finale for it. And Ratchet sacrificing himself was not only a great redemption for his stupid synthetic traitor faction, also hope you guys like that name, his redemption for that and taking advantage of Arachnid and ironically setting up his sacrifice without even knowing it. But yeah, it was the best way to end the story. And yeah, true, like I said, Soundwave, the Cons, Shockwave, Predaking, Dreadwing, they could have all come together and mounted an attack, but the amount of time that would have taken, plus Ultra Magnus, Wheeljack, and Smokescreen, they have no earthly chance of beating the Autobots in this team. And like I said, some of you might get mad at me for the way I directed the Sea Spray, Skyquake, and Cliff stories whenever there was a good deal of cons left or a little bit of threat, but you just gotta think, every story has been put in place, mainly, besides the Dreadwing one, kind of, for the cons not to matter. Because sometimes, all it takes is one thing to flip the scale. And Breakdown and Knockout joining was, like Skyquake, the worst outcome for the Decepticons and the best outcome for the Autobots. And with that, that ends this story. Honestly, I really hope that you guys liked this, because I wanted, even if it ended a season and a half and a movie early, I still think that you guys can go on to say, this is probably the best Decepticon story that I've done on the channel so far. Cliff might still outpass as the greatest Autobot story for quite a long time, because Sea Spray can't really compare. But for Decepticon, I feel like you guys could definitely agree. This was probably the best work. But for those of you who still appreciate the Skyquake and Dreadwing stories, hey, I'm all down for it. Those were pretty freaking fantastic works, if I do say so myself. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown story. My favorite Decepticon overall. I named a Dragon Ball CAC after him, so it was definitely not going to miss after Skyquake and Dreadwing touching upon this character, because he definitely deserved way more time. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next video, and we are 3 away from the end of the Roman Reigns list. The next one will be Crystal fighting John Wick. Crystal being from the Hunt movie, if you have not seen it. With all that said, I'll see you guys later, and stay tuned, hyped, and packed for more on-growing omniversal videos, posts, and updates.